The December wind howled through the streets of Minneapolis, rattling the windows of the modest two-story house on Maple Avenue. Outside, the warmth of the dining room felt suffocating to Marcus Thompson as he sat at the familiar oak table, his plate barely touched. At 34, he had grown accustomed to these monthly family dinners, but tonight felt different. "Marcus, honey, you're picking at your food again," his mother, Dorothy, said from across the table, her voice carrying that familiar tone of gentle concern mixed with disapproval. "I made your favorite pot roast." Marcus looked up from his plate, meeting his mother's worried brown eyes. The same eyes that had watched him graduate college, struggle through his divorce, and rebuild his life piece by piece. But tonight, those eyes held something else's appointment that had been building for months. "Sorry, Mom. Just tired from work," he replied, forcing a smile and taking a bite of the perfectly seasoned beef. The meat was tender, falling apart. At the touch of his fork, just like he remembered from childhood Sunday dinners, his father. Robert cleared his throat from the head of the table. "How's the new job treating you, son? Is that tech company downtown?" "It's good, Dad, really good. I'm leading a team of developers now, and we're working on some exciting projects." Marcus's voice gained enthusiasm as he spoke about his work. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Dorothy set down her fork with a deliberate clink against her plate. "That's wonderful, dear. But you know what would make it even better? If you could actually make it? 2 family events on time. Your cousin Sarah's wedding last month, Aunt Helen's birthday party, and now you were 20 minutes late tonight." The room fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, the familiar knot forming in his stomach. He had been here before this conversation, this judgment, this feeling of never being enough. "I texted you about the traffic on I-35, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside him. "There was an accident, and I couldn't control that. There's always something, isn't there?" Dorothy's voice rose slightly, her frustration finally breaking through her usual composed demeanor. "You've been like this since you were a child. Remember when you missed your own high school graduation ceremony because you couldn't find your cap?" Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dorothy, maybe we should." "No, Robert. Someone needs to say it." Dorothy's cheeks flushed pink, a sign Marcus recognized from childhood. She was about to unleash weeks of pent-up concern. "You're 34 years old, Marcus. You have a good job, you're finally getting your life together after the divorce. But you're still the same irresponsible person you've always been. You can't keep showing up late to everything and expecting people to just accept it." Marcus felt the words hit him like physical blows. Each accusation landed with the weight of years of similar conversations, years of feeling like he was constantly disappointing the people he loved most. "I'm not irresponsible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I work 60-hour weeks. I pay my bills. I'm building something meaningful with my career. Then why can't you show up on time?" Dorothy's voice cracked slightly, revealing the hurt beneath her anger. "Why can't you just once, prove that your family matters enough to you to be punctual?" The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the floral wallpaper seeming to close in around him. Marcus looked around the table at his parents, at the carefully prepared meal, at the family photos lining the mantel behind them. Pictures of birthdays, graduations, holidays, memories of a lifetime of love and support, but also of expectations and disappointments. "You want to know why I'm always late?" Marcus asked, his voice growing stronger. "Because every time I come here, I sit in my car for 10 minutes in the driveway, working up the courage to walk through that door and face another evening of being told I'm not good enough." Dorothy's face softened, confusion replacing anger. "Marcus, that's not it is, Mom." He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Every conversation somehow becomes about what I'm doing wrong, what I need to fix, how I need to change. I come here because I love you both. But I leave feeling like I'm still that 16-year-old kid who couldn't do anything right." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken tensions. Outside, the wind continued its relentless assault on the windows. But inside, the only sound was the steady tick of the clock marking time. Marcus picked up his plate, the pot roast, and mashed potatoes still warm, and looked directly at his mother. "You want to see me on time? You want to see me prove that I care about this family? Watch me." Marcus stepped out into the bitter December night. His plate balanced carefully in one hand, his coat collar turned up against the wind. The streetlights cast long shadows across the snow-covered sidewalk as he began walking down Maple Avenue, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. He had no destination in mind, just the overwhelming need to move, to do something different than the pattern that had defined his relationship with his family for decades. The weight of his mother's words still echoed in his mind. But for the first time in years, he felt something besides shame. He felt determination. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his father. "Son, where are you going? It's freezing out there." Marcus typed back with one thumb while balancing his plate. "I'm going to prove a point. Don't worry about me." The residential streets of his childhood neighborhood stretched before him, familiar even in the darkness. Past the Johnson house where he'd delivered newspapers, past the corner where he'd waited for the school bus, past the park where he'd played Little League baseball. Each landmark held memories, but tonight they felt different, like pieces of a puzzle he was finally beginning to understand. His phone rang. "Mom, Marcus. Honey, please come back inside. We can talk about this rationally." "I am being rational, Mom? Maybe for the first time in years." His voice was calm, steady. "I'm going to show you exactly what punctuality means to me." "What are you talking about? You're walking around in the snow with a plate of food? People are going to think you've lost your mind." Marcus laughed. A sound that surprised even him. "Maybe I have. Maybe losing my mind is exactly what I needed to do." He could hear his father's voice in the background, muffled but concerned. Dorothy was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "Just tell me where you're going. I'm worried about you. I'm going to visit everyone we both care about. And I'm going to be exactly on time." The first house was only 2 blocks away, his grandmother's old place, now occupied by the Martinez family. Maria Martinez had been his grandmother's neighbor for 40 years. And when Grandma Rose passed 5 years ago, Maria had become like a second mother to the whole family. Marcus knocked. On the door, his plate still in hand. Maria opened it, her face shifting from confusion to delight when she recognized him. "Marcus, mijo, what are you doing out in this weather?" She was a small woman in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that sparkled with warmth. "Mrs. Martinez, I know it's late, but I wanted to share dinner with you. Is that okay?" She looked at his plate, then at his face, and seemed to understand something deeper was happening. "Of course, come in." Carlos is watching the game. Inside the cozy living room, Carlos Martinez looked up from his recliner, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "Marcus, good to see you, son. How's the family? It's actually what I wanted to talk to you both about." Marcus sat on the couch, setting his plate on the coffee table. "Mrs. Martinez, do you remember my grandmother's Sunday dinners?" Maria's face lit up. "Of course. Rose made the best apple pie in the neighborhood. You used to come running over here afterward, always with your face covered in cinnamon. Do you remember if I was ever late to those dinners?" Maria and Carlos exchanged glances. "Late, no. Mijo. You were always the first one there, sometimes an hour early. You'd sit on Rose's porch steps waiting for her to finish cooking." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. You were so excited for those dinners," Carlos added. "Rose used to joke that you had better timing than her kitchen timer." Marcus shared his pot roast with them, listening as they told stories about his grandmother, about the boy he used to be. A boy who was never late when it mattered to him. A boy who couldn't wait to be part of something he loved. His phone buzzed with messages from his parents, but he ignored them. He had more visits to make. The next stop was 3 blocks north, the home of his high school English teacher, Mrs. Davidson. She was retired now, but she'd been more than an educator to Marcus. She'd been the one who encouraged him to apply to college, who wrote his recommendation letters, who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. Her porch light was on, and through the window, Marcus could see her reading in her favorite chair. He knocked softly, knowing she might be alarmed by a visitor at this hour. "Marcus Thompson," she exclaimed when she opened the door. "What a wonderful surprise. Though I have to say, you look half frozen." Mrs. Davidson, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I needed to ask you something important. She invited him inside, and he found himself in the same living room where he'd spent countless afternoons during high school, working on college applications and discussing his future. The walls were still lined with books, and the familiar scent of Earl Grey tea filled the air. You mentioned my high school graduation earlier tonight, Marcus began. My mother brought up how I was late to the ceremony. Do you remember that day? Mrs. Davidson's brow furrowed. Late. Marcus, you were one of the first students to arrive. You were in the school parking lot at 7 in the morning, 3 hours before the ceremony started. You were so nervous about being late that you got there before the janitors opened the building. Marcus stared at her. But my cap, she said. I couldn't find my cap. Oh, that. Mrs. Davidson laughed softly. You couldn't find your cap because you'd left it in my classroom from the night before. Remember you stayed after hours to help? Me set up the Honor Society display. You were so dedicated to making sure everything was perfect for the ceremony. The memory came flooding back, staying late, carefully arranging the academic achievement awards, making sure every detail was right. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to honor his classmates and teachers. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, Mrs. Davidson continued. I heard about your promotion at work, leading that development team. I'm so proud of you. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Why do you think my mother remembers it differently? Mrs. Davidson sat forward, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes parents remember our struggles more clearly than our successes. Your mother loves you deeply, but she's been worried about you for so long through the divorce, the job changes, the hard times. Sometimes worry can make us focus on problems that aren't really there. As Marcus walked to his next destination, he called his best friend from college, Kevin, who now lived in Denver. Despite the 2-hour time difference, Kevin answered on the first ring. Marcus, what's up, man? You sound like you're outside. Kevin, I need to ask you something. Think back to college, was I always late to things? Kevin laughed.
Late, dude.
You were the most punctual person I knew. You used to drive me crazy because you wanted to get 2 parties an hour early. You said you hated walking into a room full of people who were already settled in, so I wasn't chronically late. The only time I remember you being late was when your dad was in the hospital after his heart attack. You kept leaving study groups and dates to go sit with him. But that wasn't about being irresponsible. That was about being exactly where you needed to be. Marcus thanked Kevin and hung up, his understanding of himself shifting with each conversation. He wasn't chronically late. He was selectively late. Late to places where he felt judged, where he felt like he couldn't measure up, where the fear of disappointment made him want to delay the inevitable. Marcus found himself standing in front of Riverside Community Center, where he'd volunteered for the past 2 years. The building was dark, but he had his key as the volunteer coordinator for their weekend programs. He often worked late setting up for Saturday activities. He let himself in and turned on the lights in the main hall. The familiar smell of floor polish and children's art supplies greeted him. On the bulletin board, photos from recent events covered nearly every inch of corkboard: the Halloween party, the Thanksgiving food drive, the Christmas toy collection, and photo after photo, there was Marcus, arriving early, staying late, organizing activities, laughing with kids, helping elderly residents. Never late, never rushed, always present. His phone rang. This time, it was his ex-wife, Jennifer Marcus. Your dad called me. Said you walked out of dinner and they're worried about you. Are you okay? Marcus looked around the community center, at the evidence of who he really was. Jen, can I ask you something? During our marriage, was I always late? Late, Marcus. You were obsessively punctual. Used to set 3 alarms for everything. The only time you were ever late was when you were avoiding something, like when we were having problems and you didn't want to come home and fight. So, I wasn't just irresponsible? Jennifer's voice softened. You were the most responsible person I knew. Sometimes too responsible. You carried the weight of everyone's expectations, including mine. Maybe that's why our marriage fell apart. We're so busy trying to be perfect for everyone else that you forgot to be real with me. After hanging up, Marcus sat in one of the small plastic chairs designed for children, feeling like he was seeing his life clearly for the first time. He wasn't late because he was irresponsible. He was late because he was afraid of disappointing people, afraid of not measuring up, afraid of facing the weight of expectations that felt impossible to meet. His phone buzzed with a text. From his mother, "Marcus, please come home. I made apple pie." Apple pie. His grandmother's recipe? The dessert that had drawn him to those Sunday dinners as a child, when he was never late because he was never afraid of not being enough. Marcus stood up and walked to the center's kitchen. In the refrigerator, he found the ingredients he'd brought. Earlier in the week, for Saturday's baking activity with the kids, he'd been planning to teach them his grandmother's apple pie recipe. He began to cook, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. As he peeled apples and mixed spices, he thought about the pattern he'd discovered tonight. He was punctual, for things that mattered to him, for people who accepted him as he was, for activities where he felt valued rather than judged. The pie went into the oven, and Marcus sat down to wait. He pulled out his phone and began typing a long message to his parents. The message Marcus sent was longer than any text he'd ever written. "Mom and Dad, I'm at the community center baking apple pie with Grandma's recipe. I need you to understand something. I'm not chronically late, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of walking into that house and feeling like I'm still the disappointment you worry about. Every family dinner becomes an evaluation of my life choices, and I sit in my car outside trying to gather the courage to face another evening of gentle criticism disguised as concern. I learned something tonight. I'm never late for things that matter to me. Never late for work, for volunteer activities, for helping friends. I'm only late when I'm scared. I've been scared of disappointing you both for so long that I've forgotten how to just be your son. I'm going to finish this pie, and then I'm coming home. But I need you both to know that I'm not broken, not irresponsible. I'm just tired of feeling like I have to prove my worth every time I walk through your door." Within minutes, his phone was ringing. His father, "Son, we're coming to get you." "Dad, I'm fine. I'll be home in an hour." "No, we're coming. Your mother is crying, and honestly, so am I. We never meant to make you feel that way. I know you didn't. But impact matters more than intention." 30 minutes later, his parents walked through the doors of the community center. Dorothy's eyes were red, and Robert looked older than Marcus had ever seen him. "The pie smells wonderful," Dorothy said softly, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Grandma's recipe. I'm teaching it to the kids on Saturday." Marcus pulled the golden pie from the oven, its crust perfectly browned. "Did you know that I used to be early for Grandma's Sunday dinners?" "Early?" Dorothy looked confused. "Mrs. Martinez told me tonight. I used to sit on Grandma's porch steps, waiting for dinner to be ready. I was never late because I was never afraid of not being good enough for Grandma. She loved me exactly as I was." Robert stepped forward. "Marcus, we love you exactly as you are too." "I know you do, Dad." But somewhere along the way, that love started feeling conditional, like I had to earn it by being perfect, by never making mistakes, by always being the son you wanted instead of the son you had. Dorothy walked over to the pie, inhaling its familiar aroma. "This smells exactly like my mother's." She was so proud of you, Marcus. She used to brag to all her friends about her grandson who was going to change the world. I remember Marcus said quietly. "She made me feel like I already had." "I've been so worried about you," Dorothy continued, tears flowing freely now. "After the divorce, after you lost that job 3 years ago, after seeing you struggle so much, I thought if I could just help you be more organized, more punctual, more prepared, then you'd be okay. But I am okay, Mom. I'm better than okay. I'm exactly where I need to be." Marcus showed them around the community center, explaining the programs he'd developed, the families he'd helped, the impact he was making. He showed them the thank you cards from parents, the artwork from kids he'd mentored, the certificates of appreciation from community leaders. "This is who I am," he said as they stood in the main hall, surrounded by evidence of his contributions. "This is what I do when I'm not afraid of being judged. This is what punctuality looks like when it comes from love instead of fear." They sat together in the community center's small kitchen, sharing the apple pie that had brought them full circle. The conversation that followed was unlike any they'd had in years, honorable, real. "I think I've been projecting my own fears onto you," Dorothy admitted. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "When you were going through the divorce, when you were struggling, I felt so helpless. I thought if I could control the small things like being on time, then maybe the big things would fall into place. But the big things did fall into place, Marcus said. Just not in the way you expected. Robert nodded. We've been so focused on the problems that we missed the solutions. This place, your work, the way you help people, this is who you've become. And I need you to see that, Marcus said. I need you to trust that I'm capable of making good decisions, even if they don't look like the decisions you would make. Dorothy reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry, honey. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to prove yourself to us. Sorry for focusing on what I thought was wrong instead of celebrating what's right. I'm sorry too, Marcus said. I'm sorry for letting my fear turn into resentment. I'm sorry for being late because I was too proud to tell you I was scared. As they finished the pie, Marcus outlined a plan. I want to invite you both to volunteer here on Saturday. I want you to see what I do, meet the families I work with, understand what matters to me. And I want to start coming to family dinners again, but as an adult son, not as someone who needs to be fixed. We'd love that, Robert said. All of it, Dorothy smiled through her tears. Can I ask you something? What made you walk out tonight? What made you finally say something? Marcus thought for a moment. I realized that I was letting fear make me into someone I didn't recognize. I was becoming chronically late because I was chronically afraid, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. What changed? She asked. I remembered that I'm only late when I'm scared. I decided I didn't want to be scared of my own family anymore. As they prepared to leave the community center, Marcus turned off the lights and locked the door. The December wind had calmed, and the snow had stopped falling. The streets were quiet, peaceful. Can I ride with you both? Marcus asked. I'd like to finish dinner with you. Of course, Dorothy said. I'll warm up the pot roast. As they drove through the familiar streets toward home, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Instead of anxiety about family time, he looked at his watch. 11:47 p.m. Am I late for dessert? He asked with a smile. You're right on time, Dorothy replied. You're always right on time when it matters. And for the first time in years, Marcus walked through his parents' front door without fear, without apology, without the weight of expectations he couldn't meet. He was exactly where he belonged, exactly when he needed to be there. The grandfather clock in the dining room chimed midnight as they sat down to finish their meal together. Finally understanding that love doesn't run on a schedule, it runs on acceptance. It's understanding and the courage to be exactly who you are. Marcus was never late again, not because he changed who he was, but because he finally found the courage to be who he'd always been, a man who showed up exactly when and where he was needed most.